Ludmilla was pressed against the back of Ilishnish's neck as the frost dragon banked northwards to follow one of the glaciers flowing down from the ice field above. Despite being nearly perpendicular to the ground, she somehow remained attached to the frost dragon throughout the maneuver. At the crest of the glacier, they came across three powerful frost giants. One of them elbowed the tall one in the center, who turned his attention up to them. "Ho!" a voice boomed up at her. "If it isn't Fimble Veteran the Valkyrie's shield maiden. What brings you to these parts?" Ilishnish circled over them several times before settling onto the ice nearby. Ludmilla hopped off, straightening her skirts. "The pass below, Thane," Ludmilla replied. "We came to investigate something, but it seems there's nothing left to investigate." "Strange, no?" Sigurd said. "It's a good thing we have new and better opponents to train against with everything gone now." "The three of you were here for the same reason?" "Not at all. Brunhild here was recently brought back, and she's wrangled the two of us to help dig up her stuff." Ludmilla looked up at the familiar frost giant huntress, who nodded in response. Her gaze turned to the third of their number, a male nearly as tall as Sigurd, in nearly identical black plate armor. Something about him was distinct from the Frost Reaver champion, however. "I see, and this is?" "Gunnar," the third frost giant's voice was surprisingly soft. "Gunnar Eriksson, of the Frost Reaver clan. My warband and I were returned to this life by the Valkyrie last week. Something about Lord Cocytus looking for warriors accustomed to command." Wait. Sigurd, didn't you say she was the one that dumped the mountain on you in the first place? "If you're trying to worm your way out of this, Gunnar," Brunhild growled. Gunnar raised his hands in a placating gesture, and Sigurd barked out a laugh. "War, wine and women in that order, eh?" he said. "You've become quite enamored of those war games." "Of course," Gunnar replied. "We've been wasting away in these mountains for generations. Much needs to be done if we are to prove ourselves worthy of striking out into the world again. To think I'd be trounced by some goblins." "We're not striking out anywhere until we rebuild our fleets," Sigurd told him, "and Brunhild will be striking you in the head if you don't help out. Come on, let's get to digging. Gudrun's already divined the location, so it shouldn't take long." The trio made their way down the glacier with little more than a nod and a wave in parting. Ludmilla's gaze followed them until they became tiny figures in the distance, then continued to linger over the landscape. It appeared the same as it was before, except now she understood that it shouldn't look this way. The scenery was clean and without blemish, lacking any sense of the negative energy field that it must have been before. "Is something the matter?" Ilishnish asked from behind her shoulder. "I should be seeing something, but I'm not." "All right, I know that I've been explaining some fairly advanced things in the past few hours, but even I'm not that cryptic." "Sorry," Ludmilla turned to address the frost dragon. "This place is supposed to be an ancient battlefield. It's supposed to be filled with undead. That means the area should be suffused with negative energy, right? It's what collects and gains awareness, manifesting as these conceptual shadows that you described." Ilishnish furrowed her brow, raising her snout to take deep breaths of the night air. "That's odd. You said you didn't notice anything when you got up?" "The point is that I noticed nothing when this place should have been darkened with ambient negative energy. All sorts of undead were around us when I fought the frost giants here." "Darkened? Wait, are you perceiving the presence of negative energy in a different way than usual?" Ludmilla shared a long look with Ilishnish. She sighed. There was probably no point in hiding it, assuming it was something all undead could do. "I can see it," she told her, "though I'm not sure if that's what's really going on. Even small patches of it can be detected." Ilishnish idly dug up a chunk of ice, crushing it to powder with a claw. Crunching noises filled the air until she had churned up a good portion of the ground between them. "So there were undead all over the place up until the point that you regained awareness," the frost dragon said. "Can you do anything with your new sense for negative energy?" "I haven't tried," Ludmilla admitted. "The stuff in my domain chases me around if I get too close." Ilishnish shuddered, unfurling and furling her wings before settling down again. What happens if it catches you?" she whispered. "I haven't given it the chance, as far as I'm aware." "You specified the stuff in your domain. What happens when you encounter negative energy outside of your domain?" "I avoid it well before I come close," Lady Zaradnik replied, "so I don't know. The first time seeing a floating blob of darkness come after me was disturbing enough." I was already worried about who and what I was, never mind having mysterious energies doing whatever they were trying to do to me. You should find out. How could she just say that? Why? Perhaps you do not understand the significance behind all of this, Elishnish told her, but take my word for it. The more that I hear, the more I believe that you did not just randomly become undead. Someone, something, or a combination of things facilitated this. Something else allowed it. The world that humans perceive is only a tiny part of the whole, Ludmilla Zaradnik. Elishnish unfurled her wings and hunkered down. We've seen all that we needed to hear. We're going to Warden's Vale now. Could I at least have a reason? Because we are. Elishnish narrowed her eyes in annoyance. This is too important not to investigate. Grasping the top of the frost dragon's shoulder, Ludmilla vaulted back onto her seat. You're being uncharacteristically assertive with this, she muttered. I won't attempt to explain, Elishnish said. Words are insufficient. If what I suspect is true, you'll understand soon enough. Elishnish took wing, angling southwards at tremendous speeds. As they crossed over the northeastern spine of the southern border ranges, Ludmilla was reminded of something the Kronos once told her. Is it possible to know someone through the song of their soul? She asked. It is, Elishnish nodded, but how did you come across such a decidedly non-human concept? The Kronos, the pair of races that moved into the eastern ranges here, decided to stay because of that. You're starting to approach their level of being cryptic. It probably only seems cryptic because you've only existed as a human until recently, Elishnish told her. Do they have a name for you, then? Ludmilla reached deep into herself, attempting to convey her identity to Elishnish in the way that the Kronos did. The Warden of the Vale. Elishnish blinked one set of eyelids, then another. Then she gave a derisive snort. Well, I suppose you might be framed in those terms by species of druidic bent. I wonder how much they haven't told you. They hadn't told her much if she were to be honest with herself. Everything to them was self-explanatory. If one did not understand, then they did not understand and there was no point in trying to explain. Ever since moving into her territory, the Kronos kept mostly to themselves. They tended to their territory, saved Lord Mayor some mana by helping with weather adjustments, and rarely interacted even with the warden that they deferred to. Elishnish swooped down over the new lake, skimming the surface as they sped along. As they banked widely to shed velocity, the frost dragon eyed their surroundings. Where was this blob of negative energy that was chasing you around? Ludmilla pointed down towards a spot a third of the way up the new hill. Near the spot where the inner citadel will be built. Oh, I can't land there, Elishnish told her. One of the vampire brides said that Death Knights will attack me if I get anywhere close. It should be fine, I'll be there with you, after all. They made one last circuit before alighting on the hill. Ludmilla hopped off and scanned the area. It's still in the same spot. The malevolent-looking swirl of darkness came to life. Nope, nope. It's coming this way. Elishnish backed away from the direction that Ludmilla was staring in. Ludmilla backed away as well. Why are you backing away? It's big and black and scary, Ludmilla shot back. Why wouldn't I back away? The point is to let it reach you. She wanted her to what? Ludmilla eyed the dark mass drifting up from below. Long, snake-like tendrils formed and stretched out towards her. She took a deep breath and steeled herself. The tip of one of the tendrils touched her in the waist. A heart-rending sob pierced the air. She could barely recognize it as herself. Ludmilla collapsed onto her hands and knees as a cacophony of raw emotions smashed into her being. No, they were more than simply emotions, they were something alien that had taken on a life of their own. Her chest heaved as she tried to fight away the overwhelming sensations. I hope that's not catching, Elishnish said. She looked up at the frost dragon with a baleful glare. Drawing her wrist across her cheek to wipe the moisture away, Ludmilla was shocked and appalled to find out that her tears were black. That was horrible. She frantically wiped her face. Why did you make me do that? To see what would happen, obviously, Elishnish replied. Ludmilla reached into her infinite haversack to pull out a handkerchief, only to find out that the black tears had dissipated of their own accord. We're not done yet, Elishnish told her. Can you describe what happened just now? When it entered me, Ludmilla swallowed, I could feel what it was. Despair. Fear. Madness. Could you tell what caused it? She shook her head. No. Do you recall any event in that past that could have happened to create it? Nothing like what I felt. She paused. No, wait, there was. 2 men who returned from the Battle of Katza Plains died here in the spring. The blob was originally underground. It was probably where the old priest's home was. And what about now? Ilishnish asked. Is there anything there? Lady Zaradnik directed her gaze downwards, towards the spot where the negative energy mass originated. There was no sign of its continued existence. There's nothing left. What do you think happened? The same thing that happened at the moment of your birth as one of the undead, Ilishnish said. Except, you probably shouldn't let people know about this part. Doing so would be unnecessary and dangerous. Let's try this again, shall we? Do you know any places nearby where violent conflict has occurred? House Zaradnik has been skirmishing all along the border for generations, Ludmilla told her, but there was a modest battle 2 months ago. If we head to the westernmost pass between the Vale and the upper reaches, we should arrive at the first point of conflict. They flew southwest. Along the way, Ludmilla could detect no signs of negative energy from House Zaradnik's long frontier vigil. They landed on the rocky pass a few minutes later, and she carefully looked around. It's there, she said. A contingent of a goblin army was defeated near the top of this pass. It's strange, a lot of goblinoids died here at once, but it's nowhere near as large as I thought it would be. It's smaller than what those 2 men left behind. Well then, what are you waiting for? Ludmilla frowned. Something pretty horrible happened with that other blob just now. I still have no idea what came out. Ilishnish tapped a claw on the stones. Ludmilla sighed. She supposed that she should find out while things were somewhat under her control. The trust between a ranger and her companion went 2 ways. It felt a bit hypocritical if her feelings on the matter stopped at the first sign of risk. She tentatively walked over, and the dark mass boiled down the slope to meet her halfway. Unlike her first time, this experience felt strangely familiar. She walked back to Ilishnish. Running away again? The frost dragon asked. No, I'm done. That was quick, Ilishnish said curiously. Why didn't anything come out? Did you want something to come out? Well, I've never seen it before. I wanted to see it again. Ludmilla glowered up at Ilishnish. One of these days, you and I are going to have words. We're talking right now? Ilishnish replied. Anyway, your reaction here differed. Why? It was something I've long grown accustomed to, she told her. The feelings that come with battle. They're very different from what I took in before. A different type of fear. A different sort of desperation. This isn't going to do anything to me, is it? Who knows? The frost dragon shrugged. Keep doing it and you'll find out. At any rate, regardless of what you do, I must say again that it's best not to tell anyone about this. Why not? Ludmilla asked. I know for certain that the people from Xenon would be happy to know about this. No. Ilishnish's shout echoed off of the surrounding peaks, not them. From the lore that surrounds Xenon, these members here are mere feelers for a vast and ancient organization. In their shadows lurk the impression of beings that are more powerful than you probably realize. Because of what you are, they may even consider you their most hated foe. Silence hung between them for several moments as Ludmilla struggled to understand how she had drawn such a strong reaction from Ilishnish. And what am I? I don't know the whole answer to that, Ilishnish told her. I'm just a dragon, after all. Consider my explanations from before, however. When you rose, the negative energy generated by centuries of warfare ceased to exist. I suspect it was used to create what you are now. That's similar enough to how all undead rise, isn't it? It isn't, Ilishnish shook her head. Not normally. Lesser undead lead to stronger undead, but the negative energy that fuels their genesis is a result of propagation, not consumption. You, on the other hand, just stripped away an entire negative energy ecology wholesale. No undead will rise there anymore unless new events that leave more negative energy behind occur. Not only that, but you demonstrate the continued capacity to take in additional negative energy. Undead promote their own ecology, performing actions that help it to grow. You do the opposite. This is why the Kronos named you Warden. They lack the proper concept to describe what you truly are, but at the same time it effectively conveys what you mean to them. What does it mean? Ludmilla asked. I've only been able to put together bits and pieces of it so far. Generally speaking, Ilishnish answered, It is a term used by societies who exist close to nature. A warden is a champion of nature, a champion of their little part of the world. A fierce defender that stands against any and all who would dare to disturb its balance. The Sorceress Kingdom already has a reputation for sowing death, but as long as the Warden of the Veil stands her eternal vigil, a perfect piece of nature will always exist in the Sorceress Kingdom. The Frost Dragon's maw curled up in a hint of a smile. The world may see unprecedented death and devastation in the future, she said, but those evil little sheep have quickly acted to secure a place in this new sanctuary. Opportunistic little jerks, aren't they? I'm a bit weak for such a lofty role, don't you think? Weak? Ilishnish scoffed. If there's anything that I've been forced to accept about the Sorceress Kingdom, it's that raw strength is the least of what impresses the powers above. You are allowed to exist as long as you are useful, not strong. Besides, I doubt you are as weak as you appear. That pass has been producing elder liches for centuries, and then you just came along and took everything. As long as you continue to exist, you will probably grasp more and more of what you are. As such, you must do what you must to mitigate unnecessary risks to your existence. Consider it the first rule of long-lived species: immortality isn't immortality if you do something to cut it short. Someone not knowing about this won't hurt them, and it can adversely change your situation. Was it really such a dangerous piece of knowledge? If anything, the ability seemed quite useful, despite the immediate side effects of taking in negative energy that was laced with emotions like the first blob. I'll keep that in mind, Ludmilla said. How do you feel about this, by the way? Me? Ilishnish frowned. How I feel about the matter changes nothing, but I suppose I am both annoyed and hopeful. Those are decidedly different feelings. They are. On that note, do not let any truly powerful dragons catch wind of this. It has connotations that they may find displeasing. In the event that they do, the less conscious you appear to be of what you are, the less likely they will act to strike you down. Why would they do that? The frost dragon abruptly reared up, spreading her wings wide. Her tail lashed over the ground, sending stone and gravel flying off into the distance. Her right foreclaw slammed into the rocks in front of Ludmilla, faster than she could react. Please. Ilishnish begged of her unexpectedly, please. You will find out eventually. That much is inevitable. For now, however, the ignorance of those who would bring you harm is your greatest defense. All right. All right. All right. Why does she keep saying that? Leanne Wagner, arms crossed, followed at a safe distance as two Soul Eaters drew a freight wagon down the subterranean ramp of the demi-human quarter. 4 Death Knights stood at each corner of the vehicle, ready to stabilize it should it tip over the more rugged stretches of terrain. A dozen meters in front of them was a vampire bride, who was directing the wagon forward with 2 glowing batons. It wore a strange yellow helmet made of some unknown material that Leanne itched to find out more about. Why do you suppose she says that? Florian mused from beside her. Beats me, Leanne replied. All these undead servitors are supposed to be able to communicate without speaking. Maybe it's for everyone else's benefit. Florian offered. It'd be dangerous to be in the way. Maybe. Leanne eyed the glowing batons as they waved back and forth. Think they'll tell us what that equipment's made out of? You shouldn't be too greedy, Florian told her. There's already so much for you to do. It's not as if you can do anything about it right away. Probably not, but it didn't hurt to ask. The wagon slowed as it approached a section of smoothed stone along the promenades in a ring. Several dwarves awaited them. So this here's your beastie, eh? Yep, Leanne grinned proudly. The dwarf grunted. Less ugly than I thought it'd be. The gobs are still doing some last-minute checks in the tunnels. Something happened to their boss, so they ran a bit late. Is he all right? Florian's voice was laced with concern. What happened to him? The dwarves exchanged wordless glances with one another. Should probably ask him yourself, one of them replied. We probably heard it wrong, something lost in translation, maybe. As they waited, a small crowd of the quarter's denizens started to gather around them. It wasn't the best sort of crowd. Most demi-humans probably wouldn't get much use out of her newest product, but the location in the capital would serve well as a convenient place to demonstrate its capabilities to future clients. Have we missed it? A familiar voice called out from behind Leanne. Heyo, Leanne raised a hand into the air without turning around. And no, they're just making some last-minute checks before they hook everything up. Clara appeared at her side. Leanne did a double-take when she realized Ludmilla was there too. Countess Corlin had her arm wrapped around her friend's elbow. Despite not seeing them together for so long, they still looked as close as always. Baroness Aradnik lowered her head respectfully. "Forgive me for the belated congratulations on your promotion, Countess Wagner," Ludmilla said. "And my apologies for so abruptly sending Dame Verilyn to you when you're so busy." "It's okay, Leanne waved her apology away. "Things happen. More things are looking up than down, so what do I have to complain about?" "That's good to hear," Lady Zaradnik said. "I still have a mountain of work to catch up to, after all that's happened. How is the title treating you?" Pretty good, Leanne couldn't keep a fresh smile from creeping onto her face. "I ran out of money, though." Ludmilla furrowed a brow in disbelief. "House Wagner can run out of money?" "Heck yeah," she said, "happens all the time. That doesn't mean I'm poor. House Wagner always puts its assets to work, so we regularly run out of liquidity. Things'll be tight for a while, though. I'm trying to charter 2 new towns on the highway. I ain't like a certain other countess that has more money than she knows what to do with. With only the Empire and the Dwarf Kingdom fully open for trade, it's difficult," Clara said. "Riestais seems like a hopeless case since the summer harvest, but at least traffic from the south is starting to pick up again." The damn woman didn't even bat an eyelash, and she made everything seem so modest. As she had mentioned, merchant traffic from the theocracy and beyond was slowly starting to trickle in again. What wasn't mentioned was that merchant traffic from the south didn't stop in Irantal. Everyone was still wary of the undead nature of their new sovereign, but they still needed to travel through the Sorceress Kingdom to get to the lands beyond. Clara conveniently provided the answer for them in the form of her newly chartered towns. The merchants were more than happy to trade in Corlin Harbor, whose population exclusively worshipped the Six and culture closely reflected their own. After that, the merchants went straight on to Riestais or the Empire. In effect, Countess Corlin had shrewdly monopolized the southern trade that once flowed through the city. She even caught the trade coming from Riestais and the Empire headed south. As more and more merchants returned to business as usual, her decisive move would pay off exponentially. The central administration, for their part, did not care. Goods that they would have never otherwise imported flowed steadily into the city in a sort of secondary trade route. Proper accounts were being kept, taxes were being paid, and the neighbors got to see what a nice place their new kingdom was. His Majesty's mandates were being fulfilled far beyond the intent of their letter. Behind the beautiful visage of the radiant jewel of the Riverlands was a terrifying woman indeed. She could manipulate culture, mass perception, politics and regional economics with seemingly nothing more than a whim. The sort of vassal that lesser rulers feared, but the Sorceress Kingdom demanded more of. "And my ladies?" A timid voice sounded from behind them. Leanne looked over her shoulder, then down. "Oh, if it isn't Zushiru," she said. "Went and found yourself a wife, eh?" The light-furred quagga beside him fluffed up in affront. "It's me, Lady Wagner," she said. "Sorry, but I ain't falling for that scam. There are no quagga princesses." "Wha?" Leanne looked back over at Zushiru, then at the demi-humans all around them. Then she looked at Ludmilla. "Is it safe for you to be here?" she asked her. "What do you mean?" Ludmilla frowned. "You're a ranger, right?" Leanne said, "one of them demi-human annihilators. I'm surprised you haven't caused a mass panic just by standing there." Ludmilla scanned the area around her, but no one seemed to pay her any mind. Zushiru should have probably had a heart attack just from being that close to her. "Now that you mention it," Baroness Zaradnik replied, "demi-humans don't appear to react that way to me anymore. I feel like I've lost my touch when it comes to dealing with them." "Huh," Leanne said. "That's weird. You're still a ranger, yeah?" "I am. I wonder what you're specialized in dealing with now." "Humans." Leanne and Florine looked over at Ludmilla with twin frowns. Clara remained attached to Ludmilla's elbow. Leanne stepped over to the other side of Florine. Could Ludmilla not so casually say such horrifying things? That's a joke, right?" "Probably not," Ludmilla replied with a straight face. "I'll find out for sure one of these days." "How?" No, she didn't want to know the answer. Some things just weren't worth knowing. Leanne tapped her foot as she awkwardly looked around for something to distract her. Her gaze fell upon Zushiro again. Oh yeah, she reached into her infinite haversack. That thing I said I was going to get you finally came in. Zushiro looked up at her curiously. What thing? You know, the thing. She motioned vaguely with her free hand as she dangled out a pendant. At first, I thought about having some protective goggles crafted for you, but then I remembered that they sell these in Carnassus. The Quagga merchant sniffed at it curiously. There are some day-blind races out there, Lian explained, so they make these necklaces for 'em. You don't have to worry about being caught out in the sun or artificial lighting anymore. Oh. Zushiro raised the pendant in awe. With this, one of the great banes of our kind is vanquished. Dear wife, help me put this on, please. I'm not your wife. Dame Verilyn replied testily. Despite declaring this, she snatched the necklace and tied it around Zushiro's neck. Well, that's amusing. Hey, Ludmilla. Yes? You were trying to make sure Dame Verilyn would be ready for her job in a few months, right? Yes, was there a problem? More like a solution, Lian replied. Zushiro wants to go to the Empire, too. We can send him as a couple, they'll be afforded all the leeway they need when it comes to out-of-place behavior. Do you hear that, dear wife? Zushiro chittered excitedly, we are an official couple now. I'm not your wife. Dame Verilyn snapped, Lady Zaradnik, please. Do you think it will work? My lady. It should, Lian nodded. The Empire has plenty of demi-human merchants that come to trade from the East. They even have adventurers that are demi-humans. They've always been a part of imperial trade, so the Empire's citizens won't have any of the traces of bigotry like the people around here still do. Though Lian only had a cursory awareness of their body language, the Quagga that was Dame Verilyn looked hilariously distraught. Ludmilla turned to face her vassal. I don't see why you have to put on that expression, she said. I know how insecure you become when you visit places unknown to you. It'll be good to travel with a familiar face. You'll take care of Dame Verilyn, won't you, Zushiro? The Quagga merchant went as stiff as a steel rod at her question. Why yes mother. He squeaked, this Zushiro will protect your precious daughter with his life. Does that make me the father? Clara mused. Arg. Laughter filled the promenade. Nearby, a stone plate was pushed up from the ground. The head of a goblin popped up. After looking around momentarily, she pulled herself out, followed by a half-dozen of her fellows. All done? Lian asked. All done, one of them gave her a thumbs up. We late, bad. We're still on schedule, Lian said. What happened to your boss, by the way? Like the dwarves, the goblins exchanged sidelong glances. Dumb thing, one of the goblins waved her hand dismissively. Boss gone crazy in head. Not crazy. The goblin boss fumed, it's true thing. So what happened? Lian asked. The goblins sighed. Except for their boss. He shuffled in closer, eyes wide. Late last night, his voice was barely a whisper. Was going to bed. Then, breasts fell out of the sky. Lian glanced at Florine. Florine punched her in the arm. Did her new title not count for anything? Rubbing what would surely be a bruise in a few hours, she leaned forward. Breasts? Just to be sure, you mean tits, right? Funbags. Mummy milkers? The goblin boss nodded his head energetically, and the other goblins groaned. The mommy milkers fell from the sky. He moved his arms in wide, grasping motions. Before I could flee, it was so soft, so nice. Try to escape, but cannot. Cannot move, cannot breathe. Everything goes black. When wake up, sun already in the sky. Late. A long silence extended after his account. Clara and Ludmilla cast blank expressions at the goblin. So some sort of pervert attacked you in your bed, Ludmilla said. Suffocating you with their breasts. The frontier noble's voice was mixed. It was a feat that was clearly beyond her capabilities. Would she seek justice? Justice for the Plains faction? Did you report it to one of the local militia posts? Florine asked. This is assault, isn't it? Yeah right, Lian scoffed. I can imagine that right now. You'll be brought in as prime suspect. Ow. Do you know how stupid this sounds for everyone involved? Once the judiciary issues an advisory, half of the men in the city will start sleeping on hammocks outside, praying to become the next victim. That's horrible. It's true. Lian returned. Let's just preserve the dignity of the Sorceress Kingdom and move on. We need to get everything set up, can't be standing here forever. The vampire bride resumed her direction of the wagon, now with the assistance of the dwarf contractors. After the device was set on its mountings, the goblins went to attach several pipes to it. The Death Knights screwed long steel rods into the central shaft, then took their positions behind each one. Let's give it a dry run first, Lian told them. Let me know if you feel anything off. As one, the Death Knight stepped forward, marching in an endless circle as they drove the shaft. Lian couldn't hear anything amiss, and there didn't appear to be any difficulties after several minutes. First switch, she called out, licking her lips. One of the Death Knights reached up to pull a lever overhead as it passed by. The gear slipped into place with a clink. 5 minutes later, a hollow gurgling sound filled the air. Muddy runoff filled the trench that the goblins had crawled out of. Works? The goblin boss said. Well, I'll be damned, one of the dwarves exclaimed. It worked. Of course it worked. Lian huffed. Just who do you think designed this? Throw the second switch. They went through the second, third and fourth switches. Lian crossed her arms with a supremely satisfied look. I suppose I'll have to buy a few dozen, Clara said. Is there anyone ahead of me? I still don't know what this thing is, Lady Zaradnik muttered. This thing is a pump. Lian told her, or more accurately, a pumping station. It draws water from the lake on the lowest level here, then uses it to wash all the sewage from the quarter into the mushroom grottos below. The second switch opens a channel that will flush excess out into the city sewers. Third pumps it out to the lake on the surface. Fourth is the emergency overflow. It can handle 4 channels at once, with 50 times the throughput of those old screws that everyone's been using until now. If you use Death Warriors instead, will it be able to do even more? The prototype at home could handle Soul Eaters, so Lian couldn't see why not. That's up to the operator, Lian said. I just sell the pump, the Sorceress Kingdom provides the power. You'll be booked up for years, one of the dwarf contractors said. A piece of machinery like this must have taken months to build. Lian grinned. Including the prototype, it had taken her main workshop a week. Soon, every place that used pumps, mines, irrigated fields, water locks, aqueducts and sewer systems, would be clamoring for her new product. Assuming they had the power to run it, of course. Precisely machined out of steel, using the rock-bottom costs of runecraft. It was a piece of equipment that would last 1,000 years. She would be retooling her domain workshops over the next few weeks, but she was already wondering what she would roll out next. Zwei. Don't let I beat you with that rickety old thing. Lian Wagner hopped up and down in excitement as she shook both fists above her head. In the distant morning light, 2 Soul Eaters, Ein and Zwei, crested over the final ridge. Wagon wheels a blur, the vehicles they drew glided forward at a pace that would have astonished even those accustomed to the highest class wagons of the day. On the stands around her, the workshop crews were similarly on their feet. You're gonna lose, Lady Wagner, one of the men nearby said. It ain't over till it's over. Though this might have technically been true, Zwei's wagon was already a dozen lengths behind when it had appeared. As the seconds passed, Ein only built its lead. As the man had predicted, Ein, who was drawing the old Mark II model, made it comfortably across the finish line with no threat of a final challenge. Lian growled. Can't be helped, my lady, the man said in consoling tones. You over-engineered the Mark III. It's twice the weight of the Mark II. I even had it painted with a red stripe, she pouted. Chuckles rose from around her, and the crews stepped down off of the stands to inspect their vehicles. Grumbling, Lian eyed the small bag of gold coins that she had tossed onto the betting table. Well, it wasn't exactly a loss. The Mark II wagon was the pre-runecraft design that was proven best suited for conversion to the new technology. It was about as light as a wooden frame, but the new runecrafted steel components allowed it to harness roughly 80% of a Soul Eater's potential. For the first phase of runecrafted vehicle development, it would probably be her premier product. The Mark III, as the man had mentioned, was over-engineered. The frame could withstand 4 times the stress, so it was ideal for bulk freight. The real question was which roads could withstand the Mark III. Baharith's administrators would probably weep tears of blood if someone tried to use them in the Empire fully loaded. Leaving her crews to their work, she walked over to the nearby row of wagon bays. The sounds of machining filled the air with their song of advancing industry, and Leanne allowed herself a satisfied smile. 2 Mark II wagons a day. 2 Mark IIIs a week. 2 pumping stations a week. She already had enough orders to keep her shops busy till spring. Even the Dwarf Kingdom's Regency Council had caught wind of her new inventions. They tracked down the source and bombarded her manor office with queries for information within hours of setting up the pumping station under the demi-human quarter. And she was just getting started. Every tool, device and invention was a tiny step towards a future of untold productivity and trade flows that the world had never before seen. The idea of economic domination was like music to the ears of the Sorceress Kingdom's administration, and they had essentially allowed her the freedom to pursue her objectives. Lady Wagner, a woman's voice sounded from behind her. Lady Wagner? Leanne looked over her shoulder to find Dame Verilyn with Zushiro by her side. The enchanted pendant on his neck dully reflected the morning light. "Oh, looks like you made it," Leanne said. "Figured it'd take a bit longer to work up the courage to come out." "I'll admit that I'm a cautious person," Dame Verilyn said, "but I'm not a coward. I wanted to fly over, but Zushiro." The Quagoa merchant shuddered. Leanne wondered what the story was behind that. "How come you're not in your Quagoa form?" she asked. "You two looked pretty cute together." "It's not a form," Dame Verilyn frowned. "It's me." "Right, anyway, how's she been this week, Zushiro?" Zushiro glanced over at his wife before fashioning a reply. Zushiro can only wish he could be as brave as a dragon. There have been various changes, improvements, that have improved sales many-fold. Profits have never been higher. It is only because of her that we can travel to find new sources of goods. A merchant and a bard make an amazing team, don't they? Leanne grinned. Bards are usually too free-spirited to stand a merchant's routines, though. You're a lucky man, Zushiro. The Quagoa merchant replied with an energetic nod. Dame Verilyn, however, did not seem so enthused. "What does anything we've done so far have to do with imperial customs?" she asked. "All I've been doing is learning how merchants conduct their business." "This is the superior approach," Leanne told her. "Unless the local authorities are up to something foolish, a merchant is welcome anywhere, be it in peace or war. Imperial customs are not the only customs in the empire. You have dozens of smaller cultures in different parts of the nation. Merchants and wayfarers from all over our part of the world and beyond visit the place too. Only learning how to act like imperial nobility opens far fewer doors." "But I'm only supposed to go there to learn about the empire, aren't I?" "I highly doubt Lady Shiltier would act in such a simplistic way," Leanne scoffed. "Every member of the royal court is an excellent individual, and Lady Shiltier might be the most shrewd of them all. Everything you find out in the empire has a purpose, and the more you know, the better equipped you'll be to handle where she sends you next." Continuing to stroll along as they spoke, Leanne led them to the bay at the end. Unlike the preceding workshops, this one was not set to task creating new pumps and vehicles. "What are those?" Dame Verilyn eyed several fluffy white bales in a storage area before the building. "They're cotton bolls," Leanne replied. "Seed cotton. We got a shipment from the Theocracy, one from the Empire, another from Carnassus. I even managed to get some from Riastais." She leaned forward and picked up 2 loose bits off of the ground, handing them to Dame Verilyn and Zushiro. "Once they're picked," Leanne said, "you still gotta separate the seed from the fiber." Both Zushiro and Dame Verilyn shredded their bits of cotton. "So weak," Zushiro exclaimed, "weaker than Zushiro." "Do humans really dress themselves in this?" Dame Verilyn remarked. "They may as well be naked." Leanne cleared her throat. "The point I was trying to get across was how difficult it is to process each one. It's very time-consuming. Fortunately, the solution to that's been around for centuries." She led them into the workshop, where a colorfully decorated contraption rested on a wooden stand. Beyond its garish markings, it looked little more than a pair of rollers with a crank. "This little beaut is from far to the southeast, a churka from the nations of the Beastman Confederation." "Why would Beastmen have a tool for cotton?" Ilishnish frowned. "Hey, I know the tribal demi-humans around here don't wear much more than rawhide loincloths, but the most advanced nations in the world aren't human. They have societies of their own, with high fashion, rich cultures and more technologies than I can shake a stick at." In the Beastman Confederation, they use golems to drive these. I see, so like that pumping station, you plan on using undead labor instead of golems. That's right, Leanne nodded. Undead labor is far cheaper than any golem, and far more cost-effective to maintain. With our new supply of high-quality ores and rune-crafted parts, we can make scaled-up and improved versions of this. She nodded to an elder lich, who was standing near to the devices. It took a basket of cotton balls and dumped it into an awaiting hopper. A Death Knight carefully turned the crank. As the rollers spun, they effortlessly separated the seeds from the cotton fibers, which fell into their respective baskets. It seems like the things that you come up with all have to do with undead labor turning something, Dame Verilyn said. I wouldn't say it's as simple as that, Leanne said, but that is the general idea. Machines turn power into skill, and in the Sorcerer's Kingdom, power is cheap. If you try getting a Death Knight to separate the seeds manually, they wouldn't be much faster than a human laborer. By making a machine they can straightforwardly apply their power to, a single Death Knight can do the work of 2,000. With the load of cotton separated, the Elder Lich brought the products forward to display before them. What happens after this? Dame Verilyn asked. The cotton has to be cleaned up and spooled into thread, Leanne answered. There are tools for that too. We keep enough seeds for planting. If there's excess, we'll be extracting oil from them. She led them past the churka, scooping up one of the seeds from the pile. Getting to this point is only part of the story, though. She tossed the seed into the air and caught it again. Cotton is a crop that requires special conditions to grow year after year. It's thirsty, drains the soil and requires a lot of menial labor to harvest. In the Sorcerer's Kingdom, the first two problems are solved by Lord Mayor. The question of labor is answered by, well, undead labor. I'll be using skeletons for now, but I'm sure we'll figure out a better way eventually. Slowly hand-picking everything feels like a waste. I'm curious, Dame Verilyn said as they followed after her. How have you been able to build all of these machines? Everyone that's seen them thinks that they're some sort of miracle product. Well, it's not exactly a novel idea, Leanne said, but it's still considered a technological secret of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. You'll have to swear not to disclose this information to anyone that's not already privy to it. Dame Verilyn quickly agreed, and Leanne led them deeper into the workshop. She stopped in front of an empty workstation. This is one of our new lathes, she said. Our old ones were used to make wagon axles, mill shafts, gears and all sorts of other wooden parts for generations. The new ones are designed to work with steel. Steel? Dame Verilyn frowned. Why not something better? The name of the game isn't to make the fanciest stuff around, Leanne told her. It's to be the most economical. Only people with way too much money and no common sense would try to purchase something like an adamantite wagon. Now. She looked around for a moment before waving over one of the apprentices nearby. Yes, Lady Wagner? Give Dame Verilyn here a step-by-step demonstration on how the tools here work. Of course, my lady. The apprentice instructed the Death Knight at the station to retrieve a 4-meter-long piece of bar stock. They worked together to fix it onto the lathe. The basic idea, Dame Verilyn, he said, is that a lathe spins the object that's currently fixed to it. 2 soul eaters are driving a shaft that runs under the workshop and connects to this station. He pressed a pedal at his feet. The steel rod started to spin as a gear clinked into place. The craftsman uses a metal instrument to shave the piece down to the desired configuration. He fished a rune-crafted bit out of his pocket. All one has to do is hold the bit against the metal and let the rotation do the work. Dame Verilyn stuck out her finger, pressing it against the spinning rod. Fragments of metal flew everywhere. Zusharu threw himself to the ground. Leanne took refuge behind a Death Knight. The apprentice stomped on the pedal again, releasing the drive shaft. The workshop employees stopped to look over at the commotion. Leanne peeked out cautiously. "Hey, are you all right?" she asked. "It's unenchanted steel, yes?" Dame Verilyn replied, "It can't hurt me." "Is she a vampire bride?" The apprentice gaped at her. "No," Leanne sighed. "Please don't do that again, Dame Verilyn. You might be impervious to that sort of damage, but the people around here aren't." She instructed the apprentice to start all over again. They removed the old metal bar, which had been shaved down into an odd-looking shape, replacing it with a new one. The apprentice pulled an instrument out of the pocket of his apron. This is what we use to set measurements, he told her. It's not rune-crafted, but conventionally enchanted. There doesn't seem to be a rune-crafted version. He held it up for Dame Verilyn to observe. 50.5 millimeters. Oh. The points of the magical gauge adjusted themselves to the indicated length. What happens if you say 10 kilometers? Dame Verilyn asked. Nothing, the apprentice smirked. These ones only go to 30 centimeters. It's more than enough for what we do here. The apprentice got to work calibrating his workstation. After nodding to himself once, he started up the lathe. We use a steel bit with a rune that maintains sharpness, he said. Normally we'd have them made out of a higher grade material, but this tool is 1/100th of the cost of a mithril one. It probably lasts longer, as well. You'd have to abuse these pretty hard to break them. The apprentice carefully crafted the new roller, then created threads for screw caps on the ends. When he was done, the Death Knight held out the piece for inspection. This'll be on the next shipment to the runesmiths, he told her. Once the appropriate runes are carved and imbued onto the ends, we'll affix the caps to protect the runes from being damaged. When we get it back, we'll have a new roller for an upscaled churka. That was rather quick, Dame Verilyn muttered. Yep, the apprentice nodded. It's amazing how quick things get once everything comes together. It's like that with all the parts. We have lathes, drills, trip hammers, all sorts of machines for making anything we need, all powered by undead labor. Our productivity is through the roof. If anything, we need more rune crafters. Speeding things up on our end is as simple as building more tools for more workshops, but rune crafting takes time. I see, Dame Verilyn nodded slowly. Well, thank you for the demonstration. Not a problem, the apprentice tipped his protective visor and went back to work. Walking back out of the warehouse, Leanne cast her gaze south, over the test course and to the Katza plains beyond. Some things technology couldn't fix. Yet. You ready for the next phase of your training? She asked the bard and merchant duo. Are you sure we can do this? Dame Verilyn asked. Yeah, no problem. Leanne answered, you're just going around the Sorceress Kingdom for this. The Ministry of Transportation wants a few of the new wagons delivered to the Great Lake for testing, so we'll start you off there. Lord Cocytus is keen to figure out what additional exports the demi-humans in the region can produce, but those lake races are notoriously sedentary. What will Zusharu do? The Quagoa merchant twitched her nose up at her. Have fun. Leanne grinned, make money. Making money is fun. A lot of merchants consider this part of their careers the best of times. If it wasn't for the bandits and monsters and such, anyway. You won't have to worry about that in the Sorceress Kingdom, so buy and sell to your heart's content.